Have you suddenly been confronted by the certainty of mortality? Unsure how to process the continuation of your own life after the end of a loved one's? Questioning the existence of an afterlife in order to alleviate the sudden and overwhelming feeling of loss you feel ebbing in your gut? Well, don't worry, we're here to walk you through it in Death 101, the Griever's Guide for all your mourning needs. Part 1. The Funeral. If you've never attended a funeral before, you'll find that they can be difficult environments to navigate. Before going in, it's important that you know how to present as an effective mourner. You might be asking yourself, what is an effective mourner anyways? And how can I become one? Effective mourners are individuals who have mastered the act of appropriately expressing their emotions around other people. Becoming one is a matter of 4 basic steps. Step 1. Have anecdotes about the person who has passed prepared. These will serve as proof that you really did know the person and that you're allowed to be sad. The more anecdotes, the better. Think of the funeral as a heavyweight wrestling match. The more weight you bring, the more you're sure to win, and the sadder you'll be allowed to be. Step 2. Present appropriately. An effective mourner is good looking. This indicates to your peers that in spite of this tragedy, you're still able to care for your physical appearance. This then reminds them of your evident superiority. Be sure to present at an appropriate level of attractiveness, though, as being too alluring will inspire sexual ideation in those around you. As being horny during a funeral is generally frowned upon, these thoughts will make your peers uncomfortable and therefore less approving of you. Step 3. Have control over your tears. You are their master. Be aware of your surroundings and be prepared to cry at the proper moment. Here are some examples. Going up to speak at the memorial? Don't cry. No one will understand your expertly prepared anecdote through your sobbing. Are those around you crying? Feel free to cry, but be sure to cry at a similar level of intensity. This way, you avoid seeming either heartless or melodramatic. Driving on your way to the burial? Do not cry. Crying while driving counts as distracted driving. Step 4. Bring your own flowers to toss into the grave during the burial. They will usually be provided, but bringing your own proves that you are just one step ahead of the game and reiterates that you are the superior mourner. Follow these steps and you will become an effective mourner in no time. Remember, how you feel on the inside is not nearly as important as how you present on the outside. Part 2. Introduction to Grief. After leaving the funeral, you will need to start preparing yourself for a lifetime of confusing, unresolved emotions, otherwise known as grief. Grief, like the classic American cheeseburger, has many juicy and delicious stages, all of which you should be prepared to embrace. Let's dig in. The first stage of grief is shock, or the onions on a scrumptious burger. Onions add a sharp, bitter crunch, a taste and texture you didn't want and weren't expecting. In salads, in spaghetti, and soups, shock is constantly reappearing, always delivering that obnoxious 1-2 punch. The next stage of grief is denial, or the lettuce on this mouth-watering, man-handled masterpiece of meat. Lettuce is sneaky, because it will try to convince you that this meal could be healthy in some way. The truth is, though, that no matter how much you deny what just happened, it doesn't change that you just engorged your digestive system's worst nightmare, and you're going to feel awful. The third stage of grief is anger, or the hot red tomato. Here's the thing about tomatoes. No matter how you feel about the taste, one thing's for certain. The juicy, gooey insides of that bright red bitch are gonna make your cheeseburger a sloppy, wet nightmare. As you chow down, the slurpy bun seeping through your soaking fingers, you'll ask yourself, how could this happen? How could anyone let this happen? How does this happen every day all over the world? How does anyone deal with this? Curse you, you wretched red fruit! This is why the wet bun represents depression, the next stage of grief. The realization that the once warm, once fluffy bun has become a glorified turd can truly break a man. You may find yourself not wanting to carry on, not even being able to get out of bed. What's the point? Everything just ends in a big, painful pile of mush. Next comes bargaining, or the cheeseburger's toothpick. Ah, the loyal toothpick. You think to yourself, maybe if I stick this wee bit of wood in here, Sammy, it'll turn back time. What a lovely thought. What a lovely idea that a simple, irrelevant act could inspire the impossible. But anyone who's used a toothpick knows that it just doesn't work. It might feel good for a minute, but let's be honest, nothing will change the reality you're living in. Bargaining is often followed by the much more reasonable testing, which is represented by eating the burger with a fork. Eating a cheeseburger with a fork wasn't your first plan, but circumstances given, it might be your last. It's time to carry on and finish this damn meal, even if it's just not the same. Acceptance is the final stage of grief. Acceptance is an empty plate, followed by an understanding that the meal is over. All good things must come to an end. Part 3. Moving on. Now that you completely understand all of your emotions, you may find yourself wondering, how much longer should I be sad about this? Does grief have an expiration date? When will I stop feeling sad? We recommend that you follow the 72-hour rule. This means that you will stay upset for no longer than 72 hours after the funeral. Any longer, and you risk offending those around you, especially those who did not know the person who passed. The fact is, grief is most poorly handled by those not experiencing it firsthand. These people, who will tell themselves that you just need some time alone, are simply unequipped to deal with their impending mortality. In order to combat their fears and prove that you are still a viable social candidate, make sure to adopt aggressive friendliness. Call your friends regularly. Attend every event you're invited to. Throw your own party. But most importantly, whatever you do, don't mention death. Remember, what they want to hear is that this experience has not fazed you. If executed properly, they will feel like nothing even happened. Those struggling to adopt the 72-hour rule should begin to practice private forms of self-expression. For example, you may find yourself wishing you could speak to a loved one after their passing, though this is obviously impossible. In order to expel these silly urges, we recommend writing a letter to your late loved one. As you sit down to write this letter, we
There she is. My dog Mitzi. I really missed her when she died. Sometimes people get sad, and they really do feel bad. But the very same people who are sad sometimes are the very same people who are glad sometimes. It's funny, but it's true. It's the same, isn't it, for me? Isn't it the same for you?